Okay.
Well, the 95's got to go in the backyard now. We found an oil leak, and that's what was smoking. Well, 2 Jeeps in the backyard, and that usually means that I'm doing some repairs. A couple weeks ago, Randy said there was something leaking from the motor on this YJ. So we started it up, and sure enough, there was oil oozing out of the oil pan on the bottom, right about where the oil filter is. So we're going to change the oil pan gasket on this. Couple things that you're going to need to know. 1, disconnect the battery. 2, you're going to have to pull the starter to get to this. And drain your old oil out. But let's get into it. This should be a pretty easy job. Let's hope that the old story that you're always 1 bolt away from a 20-minute job becoming a 3-hour ordeal doesn't happen with this oil pan gasket. So as you can see, there's oil dripping all down there. The oil pan looked like it was leaking from right under the oil filter. Now I checked the oil filter to make sure that it was tight. It was leaking before I did an oil change. But the starter's in the way of several of the bolts, plus we're gonna have to pull this plate off, which requires these 2 bolts here coming off. I'm gonna try to do it without taking my exhaust out of the way. Just a quick reminder, I am somebody who loves twisting wrenches, and I do a lot of my work in the backyard. If you're a backyard mechanic or a driveway mechanic, make sure that you double check your work, because that can save you a ton of grief if something goes wrong later on the trail. Number 1, disconnect your battery. First thing I gotta do is disconnect this. This is the starter. So let's get that off there real quick. It's nasty. Big one, 14. You're gonna have to hold on to that with a pair of pliers, but I don't know if I just damaged the starter or not. These look like Torx heads sticking out. What I found is a 10mm wrench. Seems to get a decent bite on it, and I'm gonna see if I can break it loose with that. And it's supposed to be very tight, but it is not cooperating. This is the starter bolt. There's 2 of these, and if you notice the end of the head, it's a very unique bolt. What I had to do is go to Napa and get this part right here.
External star socket.
This plate right here has to come off. So this bolt and the one on the other side have to come off. So this plate goes on the bell housing on the bottom part. There are 2 13mm bolts on the top and 18mm bolts and nuts on the bottom. These are the 18mm. They go all the way through the bell housing. They're pretty big, so you got a nut and a bolt that come off of that. The 13mm are small, and they're up at the top holes up here. 5/8 wrench to get the oil pan bolt out. I have a feeling it's going to hit the drop down pipe and make a mess. That's fresh oil too. I probably don't even have 200 miles or 100 miles on that oil. When you are going to remove all of the bolts from the oil pan, it's important to remember which bolts go where. So the easiest thing to do is to take a box like this, and with the outline of the gasket, poke holes in it, write a little note that says that's the front of the motor over that way, and then when you take a bolt out, you stick it into the corresponding hole so you can get all the bolts back where they belong. Oh, Felpro, you failed. You did not give me the snap tabs. Snap tabs were in the picture, but they were not included in the box. So now, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take a marker and I'm going to mark the holes. So next up for me is to get all of those bolts off. I think some of them are going to be 13 and some of them may be 14. But we're about to find out. 13. There are some 13s, but I think there are some 12s too. So let's pull the 12 out as well. So the smaller ones, there is several different size bolts on this. These two front ones are 11. Okay, well, so we had 11 millimeter, which is also about 7/16. Now we're going to 13.
So you're marking, and I'm marking the sizes of to get into it.
While you have your oil pan off, it's kind of good to take a really good look at what's going on in there to make sure that you don't have metal shavings. And the inside of my oil pan, it actually looks pretty good. There's a few crusty things, but not too bad. Clean this all up, get all this extra grease off of there, and then we're going to clean the underside of the block, and then we'll go ahead and get ready to put the gasket back on. All right, oil pan is off. Careful once you take your last bolt off, the oil pan is going to sag down if you're lucky. I think my old gasket is up here still. Yep, this is my old gasket, and our leak was coming somewhere over here. That's the end gasket. It feels like it's got a groove that it has to set into up in there. That end gasket's going to fit inside this groove right here. The rest is going to go through here. I really want to clean this up a little bit, but I can actually see through here. If you look up in there, these are your piston arms, and they're attached right here, and they go up and down in your pistons. And what I can see in there looks pretty good. Not bad for 200 and almost 50,000 miles. You can see a little bit of wear there. There's the crankshaft runs through the motor. It rotates and it pushes the pistons up and down. The pistons are up in here. But let's go take a look at the oil pan before we start cleaning this up. So crawling out from under here. You're gonna need a light so you can see what you're doing down here. And what we need to do now is we need to clean this edge. Might as well clean off all the goop that's under here while we're at it.
This job would definitely be easier if somebody had a lift.
There are a couple points right here that have a seam, and I've seen most people put a little bit of blue RTV on them. There's another one down here in the corner, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, so I'm gonna try these snappets to see if I can get them to go in and help me line everything up. Yeah, I need the gasket.
You want the gasket?
Yeah. So Randy's gonna hand me the oil pan. Hold on to it. Take the camera.
Yep.
Okay. Let's come down the next side again. So I got one more and then there's a gap. We're down to the last bolts. There's a bracket across here that we have to put on too that kind of like reinforces that rear seal to make sure that it's sealing properly. A lot of leaks come from that gasket right there, and people mistake that for a rear main seal when it's just the seal on the oil pan. Hopefully everything will be lined up, and when we tighten everything up, we'll be good to go. These smaller ones are supposed to be torqued in inches. What's the smaller ones say?
84 inch-pounds.
And what's the big ones?
132 inch-pounds.
Okay, so 80 what?
84 inch-pounds.
84 inch-pounds on the small bolts and
132 inch-pounds.
and 132 inch-pounds on the bigger bolts. This little metal bracket goes across the back, and it's gonna help reinforce the steel where that seal is. So it goes way up in there. So I'm gonna start with this one right here, and I'm gonna snug it down. I'm not tightening it all the way. Let's see. You can kind of hear it when it's crunching down. All right, time to put this plate back on. Somewhere. That's one. And those two small bolts are 13 millimeter. Well, another day, and yesterday afternoon it poured like crazy, so I couldn't work on it after work, and we're gonna go ahead and wire up that starter. So the battery's still disconnected. There's two wires to the starter. That part right there snapped off on me, so hopefully it'll still work. I tapped it back in. I'm gonna use a pair of needle nose to try to hold that so I can tighten that nut up. Now that the starter's hooked up, it's time to go ahead and hook the battery back up. Well, I looked all over for my funnels. The only funnel I could find was the one for burping my radiator, so I suppose that'll have to do. Starting with 4 quarts just to see if it's leaking. Well, I still got an oil leak. Now we have to identify where it's from. Oil pan gasket is not leaking. It is leaking from somewhere up in here. I think it's leaking from that right there. Probably the oil sending unit. So the top of the oil sending unit was half off and leaking oil out. I went to check for leaks and it was still leaking. Come to find out, it was leaking from the oil sending unit. So I got a new oil sending unit, CarQuest. This is the part number right here. And I got a specialty socket, because to get this off, you need a socket that can reach all the way down there to get that oil sending unit out. Wow, that thing got a lot of oil oozing up through that switch. That's off. So these two parts snapped in half while I was taking it out. That's the oil sending unit. That's the old one. Got to be careful putting the new one back in. That right there is where the unit is going to attach. Want to be extra careful as I thread it back in so that I don't break that piece. It's all the way down in there. Now we gotta work our way around it, but I found it. Should plug in. Getting that top piece on there, it'll act like it doesn't fit, but it's just an alignment thing. You got to make sure it's lined up. Well, that's the oil sending unit fixed. The only thing you're gonna have to do is get a specialty socket. That's it right there. There's a link below. So the oil pan gasket has been changed and the sending unit has been changed. Right now, this YJ is not leaking oil. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. This is an easy thing that you can do, but you will need to spend a little bit of money on a specialty socket. The part itself, you can order it. It should cost you anywhere from $40 to $50. Do not buy the $15 or $20 one, because it'll probably snap in half and does not last very long. See you next time.